and welcome to the virtual edition of our year-round member screening series, Film Independent Presents. My name's Jenn Wilson, and I'm a senior programmer here at Film Independent. Thank you to Film Independent lead sponsor, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, and thank you to our new official partner, Vision Media, our new virtual screening platform. Also, Film Independent now has an emergency filmmaker support fund for Film Independent fellows whose livelihoods have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. To find out more information about that, you can go to filmindependent.org and look under Education and Resources, or send an email to artistdevelopment@filmindependent.org with questions. Just a note to anybody who's watching today, if you would like to send us a question, there's a question button at the bottom of the screen where you can just type in a question, and our guests will be taking some audience questions at the end of the talk. And now please welcome today's special guest, Joe Robert Coe. He's the co-writer of Black Panther. He was a writer on and producer on People vs. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story, for which he was Emmy nominated. He's here today to talk with us about his new film, All Day and a Night, which is currently streaming on Netflix. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today, Joe.
Happy to be here. Hi.
I love to start out with, because we have a lot of Film Independent members that are indie filmmakers, with the career trajectory question. So did you start out in writing? Did you always want to be a writer? Did you always want to be a filmmaker?
Well, I see myself as a storyteller, and it's really in whatever way that manifests itself. I wanted to tell stories, didn't have access to necessarily the resources to be a director, and so I went and got Sid Field's screenplay book and started writing about halfway through my freshman year of college, and just kept writing and realized I loved writing a tremendous amount, but always knew that, I would at some point get behind the camera because I enjoyed that as well. It's like having a bigger toolbox in a lot of ways to tell your story. And so it was just a process of kind of getting to the place where I could make that happen. I started out, I came down with a couple, after I got out of college, I had written a couple spec scripts that people liked. One was All Day and a Night. And the other was this, was a kind of Chinatown-ish LA cop story that Marvel got a hold of. And I sat down with them and they wanted to do a roadie movie, which is War Machine. And I won that job. I pitched for months. It felt like a long time. And eventually up to Kevin Feige won the job. And then they decided at the time that because of what was going to happen with Iron Man 3, they wanted to delay or decide whether they were going to have me write a roadie movie at some other point. And at that time, they asked me then, did I want to be in their writer program? And I didn't know what it was. And they told me what it was. And I said yes, which was, I think, a very smart and pivotal decision for me.
How long was this after you left school?
Oh, this was hell. I try not to remember. It was, it wasn't right away. I'd been down here writing and trying and, working for a while to get there. I didn't fall out of school and find myself in the writer program. Right. Not at all. I wrote those two specs once I was out of school, and once I was down here. So, so I was in that program. And then from there, I had a great experience there. I was able to get paid for once to actually work on my craft and be working with really great executives, see how things work there. And got out and was able to start booking jobs. I booked OJ. Well, I booked a sci-fi movie, and then I booked OJ. Then I booked Black Panther, and always had the script ready.
So you did Marvel's program and wrote a few scripts, and then did OJ, and then came back and did Black Panther. Is that okay?
Yeah. Nate Moore. When I was in the program, I wasn't a comic book reader, and so when I was in the program, I was being introduced to a lot of comics and a lot of their IP and their canon. And Nate Moore always was a huge fan of Black Panther. And I remember being in the program, he would tell me about it. I didn't work on it while I was in the program, but I remember reading some of the comics because he was such a fan of it growing up. And then I went and I was doing OJ, and I actually, when they put Black Panther in Civil War, I knew at some point they're going to make a standalone movie, and Nate kind of hinted. We were at dinner one night. He kind of hinted, that we're thinking about this, and so I had to win the job. They came. I think they went out to a few writers. I was working on my pitch while supervising my OJ episodes, and went in and pitched to Kevin and then got the job there. But yeah, it was really interesting. I had no tie to it before.
So do you think they have any plans to go back and do your War Machine script at some point?
I never wrote it. Never wrote it. It was like, I got hired. It was like the happiest 2 weeks. It was like this big job. And then I get a call saying, oh, we're not going to do it. Okay. But here's a consolation prize. Would you be interested in this writer program? And, like I said, it was a great opportunity to be able to do the job. I wrote more scripts in the program than I would have written if I just got the job doing that. So I never wrote it. Yeah. Did
you write some whole movies then?
Yeah. The process works where they give you a character, you read all the comics, then you'd come up with an outline of what you wanted the movie to be. You pitch it to them. They would give you notes, and then eventually they green light it. And then you'd go and you'd write it. They just gave you an office. There was no supervision. You'd write it, then you give it to them, and they'd give you notes, a few rounds of notes, and you're dealing with the same executives that work on the movie. So you're essentially going through the process that you go through on a normal film, but whatever executive would be off cycle and isn't in production, you're working with. And so, so it was a really good experience in getting notes, understanding how they work. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that's what their process was. So they have scripts that they're getting ready to go by a bunch of different writers then kind of on an ongoing basis then?
Yeah, they have these scripts. They have a library of scripts just sitting there. Whether they use them or not, I think it's smart for them also because they're exploring, the scripts that we were working on weren't their top characters all the time, and this was early on. So they were kind of dealing with kind of the larger characters, and now they're exploring some of those scripts that were actually in the program. The woman whose place I took in the program was Nicole Perlman, and she wrote Guardians of the Galaxy. And I remember, you have a 2-year time in there, and I swapped out for her. And so that was, I think, the first script in the program that was made. So.
I promise I won't talk about Black Panther all day. We'll talk about your Netflix film, which I also love. But I always had this question, because I've seen a lot of the films in the Marvel universe. Mm-hmm. How is there does Marvel employ someone who's like a historian who tells you okay, these elements have to be in your script from the other characters in the other movies? Because the films are all tied together, and I just wonder how, if they all have different writers, do they remain all tied together storyline wise?
That's Kevin Feige. He's the historian. Kevin, he has a hand in, understanding the larger universe. So, whereas they hire different writers and filmmakers that have certain creative aesthetic and sensibilities and and fit like the overarching. It's not that many executives there, which is the crazy thing. It's only a handful of executives, and they're all friends. And so they all kind of know the canon of their movie. They know the universe. And a lot of times you're kind of throwing it like, oh, I wonder what this, it's a give and take of how it plays. It's fluid until it lands. And so there's not one set person, but it's definitely it's definitely something that is talked about, though, how things will fit, how things will play in, what might work, what might not work. But it's never kind of, you have to put this in your movie. It's always, this is an idea or that's an idea, because, I think that's just the way they operate.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about OJ.
Yeah.
Which I love. That series is one of my all-time favorite television series. Did you work a lot with Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander?
Absolutely.
I've known those guys a long time. They had a film that was nominated for Spirit Awards a long time ago, so I did a Q&A with them. It was Big Eyes. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Yeah, I remember Big Eyes. Yeah.
And I love those two guys. So did they actually hire you, or did Ryan Murphy hire you? No,
they did. So it was I had, when I was still, Brad Simpson likes to say this. When I was a baby writer and he was a baby executive, we met. I had a general meeting with Brad and hit it off with him, and so we just kind of kept in contact. And after I got out of the writers program, he asked me to coffee, and and he's him and Nina Jacobson run Color Force, and so that's their company. And he asked me to coffee, and we're just catching up. And he said, there's a show that I think you'd be great for. How much you know about O.J. Simpson? And I was like, not that much, except that's really polarizing. And so they got me the book. I read the book, and then I sat down with Scott and Larry and told them all the stuff that I thought was wrong with it and all the stuff that I thought was right with it. It's a really great, great book.
That book is kind of hard to get, isn't it? Wasn't it? Didn't it stop being published for a while?
What's his name? Oh, he's on CNN. What's the author? He's such a nice guy. He's a nice guy. I'm gonna have to remember his name in a little bit, but he's a correspondent. He's a guest on CNN all the time.
Oh, okay.
He covered the trial back then. He's written more than one book like this, where he's taken an event, a real life event, and written a book about it. But so I read the main book that it was, and I'm going to remember at some point in the middle of another question, I'm going to blurt out his name. Jeffrey Toobin. Yes, there it is. Jeffrey Toobin. So it's Jeffrey Toobin's book. And so I read the book, and I had a meeting with Scott and Larry, and they had read, Brad had given them, they gave him that Chinatown script of mine.
Oh, okay.
And so they had read that, and we sat down, and we really talked through, because of the subject matter, we really just kind of hashed through like our thoughts on it. And they are so smart and so funny and such good guys. That, I had that one meeting, and then I guess a week or so after that, they were like, we want you to be on the team. Then we all had a writer's room for 6 weeks, and Ryan Murphy wasn't involved at all. He didn't even come onto the project yet. And so it was me, Scott, Larry, D.V. Vicentes, Brad, Nina, Brad Simpson and Nina Jacobson. They were doing Hunger Games, so she would go back and forth. Brad was in there every day.
So was it even picked up by FX yet, or was
it was an FX? Yeah, they had it. In that room also was Wally Wolodarski and Maya Forbes, and so they were in the room as well. And so that was our room, and we broke out. I read probably about 10 books. Everybody did a book, and so everybody involved did a book back then. And so and then we just hashed out all of the episodes, and they started to parse out who was going to write what.
So you wrote 2 of those, right? And then one was Emmy nominated?
Yeah. Yeah, it was very, that was.
What's the time frame on writing an episode of TV? Like, how long does it take?
We had a we had about a month to write it. So you broke it out and they're like, okay, they assigned the first episode I was assigned to write was episode 5. And so we wrote those, and then we had 5 episodes done because Scott and Larry had wrote episode 1 and 2. And so then that's when I think they presented those episodes to Ryan. And so we had about a month or so to do the episode. After being so immersed, those things were just pouring out of you. You know, it was, we were talking OJ every day for 6 weeks and just so involved. And then Ryan, then there was a big hiatus, a big time period because they were figuring out Ryan's involvement. And then once he got involved, then we got assigned to write additional episodes. And so, yeah.
Would you say you felt any coming into the OJ project and then learning all that you did and finishing, that you felt any different about the OJ Simpson trial?
Sure. I think you go in kind of colloquially knowing what your family felt about it and your friends felt about it, or people, or what have you, and knowing that it was really polarizing. And one of the things that was so great about all of us, but Scott and Larry led the way, right? Was this idea of showing and approaching the 360 degrees of it. So trying to get every perspective and to approach them all fairly, so that the idea is that if you went in feeling one way, if you could come out understanding why someone felt the other way, then we had succeeded. And I think knowing more about, I have to be honest, I didn't have a strong opinion about whether he had done it or not. I just knew that the LAPD had been a corrupt, institution for a long time, and there were lots of racist issues and all of that stuff. But when you read all of the evidence and everything, it's really, really a stretch to assume that he did not commit. And so you kind of come out and you go, the information is what the information is, but was the verdict correct? And then the answer to that is probably yes, because there was reasonable doubt. And they created reasonable doubt with a lot of errors in terms of what the prosecution did, the LAPD's track record, the community that that was made up the jury lived through so many decades of police corruption. The guy they put on the stand that they didn't have to was a racist. Like all these weird things where you just didn't have to do that. The ways they could have approached it would have, I think, helped get to, I think, a fair verdict. Yeah. He did it, but the verdict based on what they did and is probably correct.
One of the things I loved about the show was going into it, I remember watching the Bronco chase on the freeway on television, and I didn't think there was anything new and I watched some of the trial too, so I didn't think there was anything new that anybody could tell me, and boy was I wrong. Yeah. There was a whole lot that I learned.
There was so much we couldn't even put in. Like there was tons of like craziness that it wasn't even just not enough room to put all of those personalities were so big, and that time period, like it was just so the beginning of celebrity culture and like overwhelmingly like taking over everything. And there were just a lot of big personalities and a lot of things happened that couldn't even make it into the show.
It's interesting. It would have been interesting if they decided to do it as more than one season and like spread it out.
Yeah. That would have. There was enough material.
Yeah. So let's talk about your film that's on Netflix, All Day and a Night. So you, I think, said earlier that you had written this going all the way back to college, right?
It was after college, but I wrote it before I got into the writer program. I wrote it probably about 10 years ago or so. So yeah, or a little bit more, yeah.
So this is the kind of film that we used to see. It feels like we, sort of gritty urban drama we used to see a lot more of in past years, but not so much of now. Like I'm sure Boys in the Hood, Singleton.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is it about this that made you want to write it and do it?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things. The film's inspired by some things that I've seen throughout my life and people I've interacted with, and in a kind of final touchstone of that was someone I was close to was murdered, and I found out about the life of the killer, and that I started to feel sorry for the person who killed my friend, the person who was close to me, and because of the circumstances of their life and the similarities in the circumstances of their life. And so, I think it was always something that I knew I wanted to, a story I wanted to tell because of my unique perspective, the idea that I was able to be in, I'm a square. I'm not like I don't have any street cred. I'm not professing anything like that. My access to that world did, though, give me a unique point of view to the humanity that I think is beneath the veneer that we often kind of put on the world, whether it's glorifying it or whether it's villainizing it, right? And so I was trying to explore the humanity of it, and I think in a lot of ways, people. I think the film speaks to systemic, generational failures in our society in these communities. And I think, so much happens in our world that for people to think about a solution for something, they have to be focused on it. And so the idea for me was to, one, make something that was entertaining and that the community it was about would tap into and appreciate for its authenticity and those things, but also to bring attention to the humanity of people struggling in these types of communities. And so it was just something it was something that it wasn't even a question of whether I was gonna do this one first, in terms of like really do this one first for me. It was just how I was gonna get it done. So,
I really like this film a lot, and I actually really related to the character a lot, in the sense that a lot of this is about choices and feeling like you don't have any. And I remember having an argument with a friend about how I didn't have any choice about doing something. And he was like, well, you do. You just don't have good choices. You don't have the choices that you want. You still have choices. It might be a choice between bad and less bad, but there's still choices. And it feels like your lead character, that's sometimes what he's grappling with. There's a choice between shitty and a little less shitty. But still, there's choices there. And I loved that each time that there's a choice, you really sort of slow down and examine that. Like there's a moment every time there's a choice. Like when he's sitting in the car, getting ready to tell that, who's the gangster character?
Malcolm.
Yeah.
Oh, when he's sitting, Stunner. When he's sitting to go and take the yeah.
When he's sitting in the car, knowing that he's going to go in and tell Stunner, that basically is becoming his hitman. It was just so raw, and so, it's not like he went into this without thinking about it. he did. And I loved that you're giving what you gave your actor there to work with, seeing him grappling with the choice and how upset it makes him. So you want to talk about your casting? When you were writing this, did you have people in mind already for?
I had Jeffrey. Jeffrey was the first. Jeffrey was the first domino to fall in terms of casting, the first person, and I did have him in mind early on, and I was looking for. I wanted someone who could disappear into this role. It's a really specific world. And I just want to say that I really appreciate, and it makes me feel great that you connected with the characters, because one of the things that was important for me, and that I was, in terms of like how I look at films and how I hoped people will approach my film, is that even though someone may not have the cultural connection to the particular character, the humanity is the way that I approach storytelling and the way I approach characters. I hope that anyone can tap into the human struggle of his journey, and not get caught up with whether or not that person looks like them or has the exact experience. And so the fact that you can connect really makes me feel good. And I really do appreciate that. But to answer your question, in terms of, oh, now I lost where I was. Wait, what did you ask me?
Oh, we're talking about your actors and
right. In terms of my actor, right. So in terms of Jeffrey, what I was looking for was someone who could vanish into this world, because it's really specific. And I wanted to make it so specific because I thought that doing that would speak to the point of view that I think the film that I was approaching, which is from this character that generally doesn't have a movie made from their point of view. And so if it's through their eyes, I really wanted it to feel grounded and in that world. And so, there aren't tons of actors who come out of the Bay Area. Yaya is one, which was amazing to have. But so trying to find actors who could then embody the humanity of the characters, which is one thing, but then also be able to kind of vanish into the world was critical. And Jeffrey's character, JD, he's a capable person. The idea is he's a capable man who has really had his spirit crushed by his circumstance and the circumstance of his family. And he's allowed that to push him to self-medicate. He's allowed that to push him to lash out violently at the world and to give up hope, right? And so I needed the person who had that intelligence, who beneath it all could have that, who we would naturally assume and feel that they're capable, and feel the kind of sense of world weariness that they might have, and the humanity. And so I approached him first, and he really responded to the script, and I feel blessed, very, very fortunate that he did. And then we started to look for our main person, and Moonlight blew my mind, and Ashton's journey, the self-discovery that he took in his portion of the film, the whole film, but his journey really stuck with me. And the fierceness and vulnerability to him at the same moment was something that I really felt that he could effortlessly and very naturally exist in the skin of Jakor. And so that was, once we got him on board, then it was really kind of, we're walking into Netflix to make it happen.
It's interesting to see his journey as an actor, because he's one of those actors that we almost feel like we've been seeing him grow up on the screen, because he was a pretty young kid when he did Moonlight. Yeah. And so to see him again, you're like, oh my God, that's that kid from Moonlight. That's the amazing kid from Moonlight.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad to see him having the opportunity, you know, to work with scripts like this and to keep bringing us his amazing artistry. And he's so good, I think, at doing a character like this who's so has so much inner conflict, and you feel how tortured he is about the situations that he's put in.
Yeah. His ability to speak loudly without saying a word makes the movie, right? There's a gesture, a look. He says so much without, because you know, Jakor doesn't often say a lot, and Ashton is amazing in that way.
I loved his two childhood friends and seeing like where they end up. There's something about that seems kind of epic when you tell a story and you show characters as children and then as adults, and the differences in where they've gone. And that's one of his choices early on, right? Between he's a choice whether he's going to be BFFs with TQ or Lamarck. And if he went the direction of TQ, if he'd gone the direction of Lamarck, you know, it's sort of one of those questions you think about, how would his life have been different?
Yeah.
But the trajectory of that was really beautiful. There's also probably my favorite visual sequence in the movie is when that rap guy T-Rex keeps torturing about his girlfriend and showing him the videos of his girlfriend, and he gets mad and he hops on the bike. And you go with him on his bike ride to his girlfriend's house. You know, when he's really mad. And then all of a sudden these little kids on bikes like surround him. Do you want to talk about like creating that sequence? I just loved it.
I wanted to take Ja, this young guy who is still just a boy in a lot of ways, right? And I wanted to kind of engulf him in the innocence and youth that I feel like he never had, but could have had, right? So you know, in my opinion, he doesn't feel that out of place with those kids, right? And the kind of possibility of a more humane and a better life is just hanging there throughout the scene. And then, so that was where we're going. And then my composer, Michael Abels, who did a fantastic job of really kind of trying to capture the spirit of youth, but also the pain beneath the youth. And that was, a lot of ways, it's a movie that doesn't have a lot of, like, I intentionally don't have the feel good movie moments in here. And Ja doesn't ever save his neighbor's cat, you know, to show he's a good, like all the things that, you know, so but I wanted, it's one of those moments that the audience can breathe a little bit, you know, even though there's melancholy below it, even though he comes into it and we know there's this impending thing going on, but that was a scene that, you know, one of the scenes that I think we're all really, really proud of in terms of emotionally how it fits with the movie. Yeah.
It was great. I think it's great visual storytelling because, you know, you don't have like two characters in a scene like explaining what's going on, and you're sort of showing what this person missed in their past just visually, and it just worked so well. I loved it.
Thank you.
So we'll take a few questions here. Let's see. Someone says, what do you think made your pitch for Black Panther stand out from other writers?
Probably, I mean, that's a question for Kevin Feige, to be honest, but having been in the writers program, I certainly went into the pitch process knowing what kind of films they are trying to make, understanding the structural dynamics that make Marvel movies work, how to embed character moments in action sequences and wish fulfillment. And I think that obviously was probably a leg up for me. But also I think once me and Ryan were paired up, we shared a lot of similar themes that we wanted to explore in the movie. And I think that I talked about some of those things also in terms of my approach. And I feel like they felt like it was a good partnership or a good direction for the film. And so it was really it's interesting because they pushed us to make a personal movie and to really lean into looking at a superhero movie from our point of view. And so I think that had something to do with it as well. But yeah, I probably had a little bit of an advantage knowing how their movies work. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think you said that your Chinatown script was actually responsible for getting you 2 jobs. The job with OJ and started you on the writer's track with Marvel. I guess for me, for the writers out there, that kind of speaks to how your own personal projects can actually lead to you getting other work. What do you think about that?
I agree. No, I was able to work on that script for some time and just make it my calling card in a way. I had the smaller, All Day Night, which is a much kind of more I want to direct this little movie thing. The Chinatown thing is a bigger script, but it was a character piece in a lot. It was about a Black Republican police lieutenant in LA. And he's kind of dealing with the politics of being an LA cop, and he's a conservative guy. And so it's just like a different character, and there's corruption and all these sorts of things. So it was in a lot of ways, a straightforward kind of cop conspiracy action thing, but it had a really interesting character embedded in it. And I had a lot of time to work on it, and I was able to work on it and refine it and make it the strongest version that I think I could at that time. And I think it was tremendously helpful for me. It allowed people to see. Part of the reasons I wrote it is because I wanted people to see I could write something bigger and not just small character stuff, but things that were larger, that were character driven as well. So I think it was tremendously helpful for me.
I mean, if they say people who try to model themselves after their favorite filmmakers, it's actually a good way to start doing it. And that script is one of the greatest scripts in American film. So that Robert Towne script, have you seen there's a book out about it now?
No.
I bought it, but I haven't read it yet, but it's about the process of writing that script. I'm really looking forward to reading it because evidently it's a fairly fraught process, which you would expect a script like that.
Right.
It's not a surprise. That took a monumental effort to write it, but
I'll look for that because it's one of those stories where everything is just done exactly as it should have been done. And you just kind of there's really, just hope if you could get just a scene that sits perfectly in that way, but a whole script that does, it's what I guess we all aspire for.
Okay. Regarding All Day and a Night, can you talk about how you came to use the baby pic in the film? I felt it gave Jacor focus.
The baby pic, so there's the picture.
Oh, is it the picture of his dad?
Oh, in the prison. Yeah, his dad holding him in the prison. So there's one where he's.
Oh, they in the prison? I thought they were in the hospital. It says dad.
Yeah, but the dad, he gets it sent to him. A picture sent to him, and then I use a bit of a flashback beat of him as a little boy looking at that same picture. I imagine that's what, yeah, you know, the idea of this kind of generational cycle of feeling trapped in your circumstance and allowing that to affect you and push you into corners where you don't have any good decisions. I think like what you resonate with, Jenn, is something that I wanted to explore in a generational way. So the idea of the journey that Jacour takes in the film of going at the beginning saying, you know, if you're trying to figure out if you had all day and a night to figure out your life, he's taken a journey of trying to figure out how he ended up in this place where he, like, I would imagine no one ever wants to be, right? And so, and in doing that, I feel like in taking that journey, he slowly finds a sense of hope for his own son, by understanding his circumstance and his life and his father's. And so I wanted to use any means, you know, like the photo and different means to connect, and to show that JD loved him and had high aspirations and high hopes for him as well. You know, I think a lot of times I think a lot of people believe that in underserved communities, they're full of like men who don't want to be fathers. And in my experience, and people I was around, that wasn't necessarily the case. They didn't have the tools and they didn't have the resources to do the thing that they in their heart wanted to do. And so that's something I wanted to explore too. The idea that both Ja and his father, if they, in the perfect world in their minds, they would have been better fathers and would have been better citizens and would have had better lives. And so that was something I was trying to explore.
Loved the grandmother's character. What was the inspiration for that character?
You know, there's that is played by amazingly played by Regina Taylor. There are scenes. There are moments that didn't make it in the film. She's just fantastic, and I wish there was more room for more of her character in the film. But there's, you know, you want to have that barometer everyone has that barometer in their lives in some facet or another, right? You may not be close to that person, but there's always someone who you can look to and has your hopes and dreams in mind, like your better self in mind, right? And so I wanted to show, again, in a sense of authenticity, that person exists. I mean, I have aunties and uncles, and I've met people who's grandmas, and you know, that figure who gives you that right advice. It may not be the advice you listen to or the person that you're around all the time, but is someone that you know loves you and you know has your best interest in mind. There's one moment in the film that it's like one thing that I wish I could have extended, and if I could go back, I would. And it is the scene where they've talked to the teacher, and Delonda has left, and Tameta is talking to the teacher, and she says, you know, she's trying to convince her to stay with Josh, stay with him. He just needs some support. Says no child left behind. That scene actually continues, and Regina goes into this, and it was her just riffing. She goes into this whole thing where she's saying, you know, he needs someone to believe in him, but I believe in you. And she really kind of goes into personalizing with the teacher, like, you can do it. You can, like, and you see the turn with our teacher as well. And, you know, we were trying to trim things down, and it's one of those moments that it just added so much humanity and added to her. It added to the desperation that of both women in that scene of wanting better for the kid. That I would, you know, I just feel like it would have torqued that a little bit more. But she was fantastic. So
I had this this weird moment where I watched her movie, and then right after I sat down to write out all my questions for the interview, and I put on some music, and I put on Bill Withers, and Grandma's Hands came on.
Oh, yeah.
And the lyrics, I hadn't really ever listened too closely to the lyrics, but it says something about Grandma understands. And I just, like, I got all teary because I'm like, yeah, that's really true. Like, so many people really feel that way about their grandmother. Your grandma understands. Even if she doesn't necessarily have the thing to fix it, she at least understands what's going on.
Yeah, and Regina she's such an amazing human being and artist, and she brings that deep warmth and wisdom and this genuine sense of love for not only Jacour, but also for JD. Like when they're in there having an argument, she loves him too and wants the best for him too. And that just comes through in her performance.
Well, so we are unfortunately out of time, but what's next for you? Another writing project, another directing project?
I'm still figuring it out. I'm writing a couple things, but I'm figuring out what I want to do next. I'm definitely going to direct more films, and I love the process, and I just want to find the right thing, and so that's where I'm at.
Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. It was great.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation.
And I hope on the next one you'll be able to come around and talk to us again.